On va maintenant partir sur
And now we are going to go to a different subject, which is very little really dealt with within the map field, and this is going to be about IP. First presentation from Clarisse, who is an expert at 𝗟𝗃𝗖𝗥𝗓𝗏, and she's going to explain that to us. And what is she going to do? Well, she's going to give us a general overview on what's out there, the projects that are available for protecting different varieties in France and in Europe. And Marc Lecréban will add something at the end of her exposé. He's going to talk about how his company can support companies and anything linked to the intellectual property and varieties, etc. And we'll take questions at the end of both of the presentations, so we could. Thank you, Clarisse. Then over to you.
Et merci de me donner.
Thank you for allowing me to come and speak today to you all. I would like to talk about the system for protecting plant varieties in France and in the EU. And I'd like to begin with an introduction, telling you something about 𝗟𝗃𝗖𝗥𝗓𝗏. I'm not sure you're familiar with us. We're a study group for the control of varieties and seeds, created in 1989, based à côté de Angers. Beside Angers, excuse me. So 𝗟𝗃𝗖𝗥𝗓𝗏 is an official body which is regulatory. It's not a swear word. So expertise linked to varieties and seeds and all of the different species which are cultivated. And one amongst our regulatory objectives is the inscription, registering of varieties. And that means what? It means the authority to put it out to market according to the rules and the catalogues which exist within the EU already. And this regulation, this catalogue regulation, doesn't concern all of the species. Some are regulated, some are not. And most of the maps are not regulated. So I'm not really going to talk about inscription or registration, but I think we have to look more at protection. That's another one of the remits, or the regulatory remits, for varieties, which is dealt with in 𝗟𝗃𝗖𝗥𝗓𝗏. We're protecting, what do I mean? This is IP. Protection for a variety, and that is something that I'm going to roll out more clearly later. Of course, then we also have the remit of certification and other official analysis of seeds, and a recent mission, which is the national coordination and the conservation of phytogenetic resources. So bear in mind that in 𝗟𝗃𝗖𝗥𝗓𝗏 we have regulatory rules to fill, and we work on all of the species which are grown, and we look on inscription and protection. I also wanted to just spotlight the definition. This is all very much an introduction to what I'm going to say, so that we're all clear about what we're talking about. When you define a species, then you have the notion of biology, obviously. You're going to have barriers to reproduction, so that people can produce, but not necessarily intra-espèce. You're going to look at the variety as well. When I talk about variety, I'm going to give you the definition, which is from the 𝗬𝗏, the Union for Protection of these licenses. They consider that a variety is a plant body with a botanic taxon, which results in a certain has characters, phenotypical characters, which result in a certain genotype. And this is going to distinguish one plant group from another by its phenotypical characteristics. And it's going to be considered as an entity that can produce much as it should over the course of time. So that's the 𝗬𝗏's definition. And they've set a legal framework with the Act of 1991 in order to protect these licenses for these PVRs, which is, plant variety rights. Then set number of rules in France and in Europe, and decrees, also at French level. I'm not a legal expert, so I'm not going to go into great detail. But what I can say is when we talk about definition of variety, even if these are concepts which we are with which we're familiar, variety has a life. It begins, it's created. Then what's going to happen? We're going to want to sell it. We're going to want to grow it. We want to produce it. We're going to harvest it. We're going to process it. And all throughout its life cycle, the GVS can intervene at different stages. And when you create a variety, this is usually work that requires a certain amount of investment. And protecting this variety means that we're going to get a return on investment for the creator and the person who's going to protect it. So the right for intellectual property to protect the variety, that's the COV in French. It would be the PVR pretty much in English. It's the IP regulation. Protecting your variety is not obligatory. It's not compulsory. It's one right that exists, but there are others. You can, have a patent. You can have a brand. This is not the case. This is a different kind of system, and it's an IP right which is really particular to the variety, and it's given to a breeder, and which confers to the breeder an exclusive right to commercialize his variety for a certain amount of time. It can be 30 years. It can be up to 30 years, and this right, this exclusive right, for the breeder is going to be an exclusive right for the production and the reproduction of his variety. He's going to have the exclusive right to produce, to sell, to export, and to import. When you talk about variety, we're also talking about reproduction as well. He can also give operating licenses to other players, other breeders. There are some exceptions to this exclusivity. The PVR does not extend to acts done for private goods or professionals or with not professional or not commercial goals. It doesn't apply to those involved in research. And to also have the exception of the selectioner. This is fundamental to the system when you look at the patent system, because a variety which is protected is going to be able to be used by other breeders, other selectioners, in order to develop and create new varieties. So the new varieties have to be quite distinctive from the one that was used at the beginning, but there's no need to have any kind of permission from the breeder in order to continue selection from a plant that is protected by a PVR or a variety that's protected by a PVR. And that's if you want to, that's in place. If somebody wants to encourage varietal, choices, then we cannot block them. And there's a further exemption, and this is the exemption for the farmer. So we could talk about farm seeds. It's very much within a framework, but the authorization of the breeder is not necessary for a farmer to use the seeds. There are, of course, rules in place, but it's not covered by this exclusivity. Now, to obtain this COV, PVR in English, you've had the definition that I gave you. This is the definition we are going to use hitherto. You have to obtain the right. It's not something you discover. It's the result of your work. It has to be new. The variety has to be new. It can't have been sold for over a year in the European directory. It must have a name, and it must be DHS, distinctive, homogeneous, and stable. In order to verify all this, you have to carry out tests on it at the crop stage to assess the phenotypes and make sure that we are dealing with a distinct variety that is clearly distinctive from the other well-known varieties that it's homogeneous, but sufficiently homogeneous, given the particularities of its multiplicity and multiplication. And it also has to be stable, sufficiently stable over time, that it remains unchanged and easily identifiable after the different multiplications over time. This is all to ensure traceability. We have to be able to identify the variety. So if you want to ask for a PVR, you have to lodge that with the appropriate bodies. In France, it's INOV. This is the national body for PVRs. You have the CPVO as well in Angers. And so the demand is going to be examined at administrative level by these particular bodies. Obviously, you have to lodge formula and you have to pay taxes, but you also have to give vegetal plant material. There will be trials and there will be there'll be an exam to ensure that it is DHS. This will be done by my team's colleagues. They're going to carry out all kinds of exams on the sample. You must give a plant sample, and that's the fundamental difference with regards other IP rights. It's going to be based on files, dossiers, and declarations. Here, we want live matter. And if everything goes well and the conditions are met, we're going to issue a certificate with the title of official IP, which can, like I say, can run up to a period of 30 years, depending on the species. You could have a description of the variety, which will allow us to keep traceability, and we'll keep some of this material in our collection in Chivez. We have DHS trials on lavender, for example, on thyme, on rosemary, on mint, on basil. We're looking at a lot of cultivated, grown plants, species, and some maps as well. I've written some recommendations here if you'd like to know a bit more. Don't hesitate to go onto the site, go onto our site. You will also get information on the INOV site, which is housed in Chivez. And you've also got the CPVO, and that's the European site. These sites will explain everything I've just said, and a great many webinars are available. And that's me. Thank you very much. Merci, Clarisse. Let's move to the next presentation. Marc Lecrivan, he's at Sicasov, and he's going to tell us what he does and what it's about. And this presentation is fairly concrete. It's going to show how we can support breeders in the management of IP through this tool, the Sicasov. I think I'll let Marc tell you more about it, and then we'll take questions at the end of this, if you don't mind. Thank you. Thank you, everybody. I'm Marc Lecrivan. I'm operational director of Sicasov. It's a structure I came to in 1995. By way of introduction, I want to give you a figure. When you're a creator of a plant variety, you invest between 10 to 15% of your turnover in R&D. So, at a given point in time, unless you're a philanthropist, the question of finance and research is going to have to be asked. When you're a variety creator and you've done your job properly and you've discovered varieties, you've got three options in order to finance your research. The first one is going to sell the varieties you've created. It's no longer your problem. You're going to sell them. Voila, you're going to find a buyer. The second option is to produce the seeds and feed them to the market, supply the market. So then you're going to have to be fairly financially solid and have the industrial capacity in order to fill the market. And the third solution is fairly developed in France and in the European states. And that's a licensed production. Well, that's good because there's a company which is an expert in this licensed production. That's the Sicasov. So what does it mean, Sicasov? It means a society of an agricultural interest for selectioners and breeders of plant varieties. So it's a cooperative. It means we pool the needs necessary for management so that it's as really as cheap as possible, if you like, for people. It doesn't to get going. So it was created in 1948. It's a small team, as you can see, and there are less than 20 of us. We're all based in Paris, pretty much. And our main activities are the following: the management of licenses, collecting fees, defending the rights of breeders. Plant and variety breeders, I should say. We were born in France, obviously. Our main battlefield is France, but we're also working in Italy and generally in Europe. Actually, really speaking, we can be anywhere where the varieties which are given to us, or the management of the licenses that are afforded to us, concern varieties which are protected by any kind of type of property. It can be a PVR, as you've just heard, but it can also be a brand or a patent. So what's the legal framework on which Sicasov rests? Well, it's fairly clear, I feel. Klaus talked about it slightly earlier. Well, the first benchmark is 61, where you have the first 𝗟𝗶𝗰 Convention. This is the Union for the Protection of Plant Variety Rights. And it's it really took place. This was the first conference, and it was really pushed forward by France. And then we had a first French law on vegetal obtention, 1991, third revision of the 𝗟𝗶𝗰 Convention. That was then transcribed into community law and set the basis for the regulation that would come later. And this was then transcribed, I believe, in 1994 into French law in 2011. And you say that's very complete, it's very varied. We're not really concerned by this because we're with maps. We haven't got any protected varieties. But Sicasov was created in 1948. Keep that in mind. We know how to protect things that are not created. We manage licenses whether they're protected or not. It's practically not our problem if they're, protected or not, but we can do it anyway. Well, the different activities, what are they? We've got these pillars, as you can see. The first pillar on which we founded our experience was the management of contracts and billing dues. This takes up a great deal of our time. These are sort of licenses, This is the heart of what we do. There are 19 of us in Sicasov. 2/3 of us are managers. We're going to manage licenses. We're going to manage bills. We're going to manage reminders. And obviously, we're going to pay out the money that we collect. The second pillar then is obviously dealing with farm seeds. Clarisse touched on this earlier. Farmers, in some cases, farmers have the right, for some cases and for some species, they have the right to keep some of their harvest in order to reseed the following year. For varieties which are protected, as long as they pay something to the breeder. That's the only reserve. You have to obviously reward the breeder. The Sicasov was chosen as, I suppose, a manager of these of this. When we're talking about potatoes and another crop, because we have expertise in billing and also in our contact with the farmers. We've got the data, we've got quite large diaries, and we've got professional agreements which treat with this subject. So this allows us to look at farm seeds and say, okay, there cannot be an agreement and there can't be a functioning system, financially speaking, if it's financially interesting for the breeders, if there is no discussion between the creator, the breeders, I should say, and the users. If the users are not ready to get round the table in order to pay the quality of the genetics made available to them through the multiplication, then nothing is going to happen. Stalemate. When it comes to managing farm seeds is that we have to agree initially and we implement a system which is going to work. Every 25 years, the farmers in France pay something towards research, because 25 years ago, they sat around the table with the breeders and they said, okay, we want to participate to the financing of the research as long as the genetic product that's available to us is sufficient for allowing us to continue our activity. That was the condition. I want to really underline the importance of discussion, dialogue, because that really is the DNA of Sicasov. We were created in 1948, as you know, just before the implementation of these PVRs. Now, the Sicasov was created because breeders and cooperatives got round the table and reached an agreement that it was important to reward research. 48, just after the war, you had to feed France. The cooperative needed some kind of assurance that the varieties that were going to be made available to the farmers would be productive enough in order to feed France. This was their goal. In the DNA of Sicasov, there is discussion. There is the implementation of systems which work and have been proven to work over a certain period of time. If you are working with the Sicasov within the framework of contract management or farm seed management, the third pillar then, which is linked to counterfeit behavior and controls and litigation, well, you will be. It's better that you avoid that pillar because it would mean you have a problem with Sicasov and with the law in a very general fashion. That's not our objective. We don't want to have to use that pillar. That's certainly not where we want to go. We have no interest in attacking people. But our objective, representing the breeders, is to make sure those who are slightly off course come back on course, get back on the right road, and they can kind of, buy back the purity by paying the due fees. Now, certainly there's a pedagogic element to be considered. The French system, as it stands, of inscription, registering, certification, protection, license managing, managing different licenses regarding seeds. Well, it's a system that's got 75 years behind it. The world envies us. This is a system which reassures the breeders and is fair to the farmers and the cooperatives, all those people who have a license and who use certification and the in registering and the protection with Sicasov. So this system, this French system, I don't think there's 1 week goes by where we don't have a visit from a foreign delegation or to the CPOV or to the GVS. There's not a week where we don't, and not a week goes by when we don't have an international visit. Every week there are foreign delegations that come to see how it works. Why? Because clearly it is the system. It works. Now at our level, we're going to try and explain how it works, so license management, fees, It works. Everybody knows it works. Some time ago, there was a Spanish lawyer who came to see us. He wanted to know how it worked, how Sicasov worked, how did we manage fee payment, how did we manage invoicing, how did we manage to pay out fees to those concerned. This Spanish lawyer is at the head of this Spanish structure which manages licenses, 𝗟𝗘𝗿𝗍. We have maintained excellent relations with this lawyer, frequent discussion between us. This is our job. This is our job, how to explain how it works, to share the functioning of the system, to ensure that those who create a variety, who spend money on research, that they are paid for this, and that this really respect the level that they've invested of time and energy that's been invested in their variety. That's what we do. We do some presentations talking about the relationships we could have with the different bodies. We have other various activities, but I'm sure that that's not particularly pertinent today. Now, we're a small team. We carry out a great many activities, so sometimes we have to call external experts to come in, lawyers, so tax specialists, experts from all different areas in order to help us in our particular jobs and what we're doing. So here's some key figures. Sicasov, what are we? We've got 5,000 varieties, which belong to 200 species. Let's be clear. There seems to be no problems. There are no problems. We've got roughly 1,200 licensed members, around 40 different countries, from 40 different countries. The biggest countries in which we work are obviously France, Italy, some other European countries, but not simply. We also have licenses in South America, Australia, Japan. The breeders then for whom we work, because we have a cooperative, I think that, well, there are 400 of them. They're for breeders from public and private research, from small to medium-sized companies, but also multinationals. We're going to manage French varieties in France. We're going to manage French varieties abroad, foreign varieties here in France, and foreign varieties abroad. So we do everything. Our job is to collect the dues, the fees, because 100 million is collected in fees per year. So the figures speak for themselves, or the camembert, the pie speaks for itself. So for the most part, it's for crops, but we also have oleaginous crops with potatoes. You've got them all there on the list. Now, a few words on how could you please mark. You've got 4 steps. You create a variety you call Sicasov. We deal with your contracts and we deal with the productors. The productors are going to pay fees to us, and that's going to then be paid on to the breeders. That's how it works. And it works well. All declared. There are controls in place. Make sure everything is coherent. We put in place statistic controls, and we go also and visit where we look at patents which can be deposed, lodged. Okay? Thank you. Thank you, Mark. A few minutes for the questions.
Bonjour.
Hello.
Nicolas 𝗟𝗘𝗖𝗥𝗓𝗏.
Nicolas, I have a question on the maps, where we can see the certain variability, and the DHS criteria is perhaps not really respected. How can we expect to make all these different varieties enter into the system? Well, okay, that's a good question when we talk about DHS. So the H is for homogeneity. Sometimes we don't ask for absolute homogeneity. This adapts to the species, to the variety. Is this vegetable replication? Is it sexually based? Is this considered? All of this is going to be taken into account, and this is going to be considered in the way we talk about homogeneity. We have population varieties, we have synthetic varieties, which are DHS, which are protected. So it is possible we can admit a certain level of heterogeneity when we talk about population variety or synthetic varieties. And then we're going to look at relative homogeneity. We're going to look at the homogeneity that exists with other varieties, pre-existing varieties. So it's not absolute. You mustn't say that it's absolute, that it's fixed in stone. No, this shouldn't be a blocking element. But there are varieties that are true heterogeneous. And as the system is made, I suppose being homogeneous is the cornerstone, because if it's not homogeneous, we're going to be it's going to be hard for us to distinguish it, and the stability over time is going to be difficult. So we have to be able to trace it, make sure we have traceability over the course of its creation and life cycle. There are varieties which are too heterogeneous to get into the system. And of course, there are other levers that exist just now. You have regulation, where we can put to market any matter which is organically heterogeneous. This is based on a declaration, but again, this is something that's going to be declared with GVs or with the catalogue. But we're not really talking about varieties, we're looking at heterogeneous material.
To those varieties.
Ouais. D'autres questions? Oui.
Oui, Xavier Simonet-Agroscope.
Xavier Simonet-Agroscope. I understood your DHS criteria, but the point in MAP selection is secondary metabolites. It's something that was always hard for me to understand. With MAPs, you can have plants that are completely similar on the outside, and their chemotype is not taken into account in the examination. It's not taken into account in the basic examination. If you can prove that your variety was created to have a higher level in such oleic acid or whatever component, chemical compound, if it's more concentrated in your variety compared with other, and that it's homogeneous, stable, and different from what already exists, then we can certify it on the basis of this additional criteria. And you can declare the DHS based on this extra criteria. I don't see any hindrances from that. However, it requires an additional protocol of testing in the DHS examination or testing. How long does it take to obtain a DHS? PVR, sorry. It depends on the species. For ornamental and MAP certification, it's one cycle of cultivation. So it takes less than a year to apply and get your certification. For apple trees, it can take 4, 5, 6 years. And the price also depends on the species. For MAPs, if it's only one cycle, you have administrative fee, 400 to 500 euros per variety. Then the tax on DHS examination. If you want a French DHS or an EU DHS, it varies from 1,000 to 3,000 euros, depending on the variety, the area you want to protect. And then you have yearly maintenance as any ownership deed, really. So it's a yearly tax between 1 and 200 euros, roughly. So yes, it does have a cost.
Oui, dernière question.
Last question. Keep it short if you can. Can new DNA analysis techniques be an addition to your works? And if so, how? Well, yes, this is one of my field of specialty. In the DHS examination, it's based on phenotypology. And we're assessing the phenotype of a variety. However, molecular biology can be an additional tool. They are used to manage reference collection. When we talk about distinction and being different of everything that exists, we have to know all known variety and to have a data bank to have them described morphologically. And in order to compare, we can go in the field, or we can have pre-screening on the genetic basis. And then we use molecular markers to screen our collections and to exclude some varieties that are too different, genetically speaking, to make sure that we are going the right direction. The last two questions. I have a question. In the assessment of map varieties, are there agronomic and technologic value assessment for some species or not? Most species in maps are non-regulated. That is, there is no inscription as we would have for agricultural species. So it will not go through the DHS and agronomic value, yield value box to tick. So the DHS is only about protecting. Last question. Good afternoon, Juliette 𝗏𝗏. I am a teacher in the FREN. Do you have available all the varieties registered and all the criteria for registration? Is it something that is accessible? Yes, it's all published, it's all accessible. The varieties that are in our catalog for regulated species, it's at the GS database. And for those with a PVR, at the French level, it's available at Grenoble. And at the EU level, it's on the website of the European Plant Variety Office. And even the description is available, the variety and phenotypical description, the criteria that have been registered, all this is available and accessible. We are running a little late, but it was worth it. So now it's time to, well, a round of applause for our speakers.